So with this Scan and Cut Saturday, I was contacted by a lady called Tracy, and here is what Tracy had to say. She says, "Hiya John, I'm at my wit's end trying to do a project in Scan and Cut Canvas. Here's the template. What do I do? Any ideas?" So listen, this is the picture that Tracy sent me, and we've got all the dimensions there. So let's log into Scan and Cut Canvas and take a look how we could go about this. Now do bear in mind this is just one way of doing it, and I'm sure there are others that you've thought of or that you will think of over time, but it's just one way. So I'm starting by giving my project a name and saving it so that I can just keep saving it as we work along. And the next thing that I'm going to need to do is get a couple of basic shapes. First one will be a rectangle. And the next one I'm going to look for is a triangle with a 90-degree corner. Okay, that's on there, sorry. Let's clear down and let's duplicate that by pressing the D key. And let's change some of the properties just so that we can see a bit better what's going on screen. Okay, so I've just given it some colour and I've taken away the outline colour. The reason for taking away the outline colour is purely because the addition of that line might mean that I'll misalign something. Now what I'm doing here is typing in the dimensions in millimetres of the total length of the project. So that includes all the flaps and all the measurements that were shown. Duplicating the second rectangle and doing the same here, giving it some colour. This time I'm rotating it though, because this was the one that will fit across the other shape, and giving it its dimensions. Now what I'm going to do is roughly position those two rectangles. Just make sure where I'm putting them. It's handy to keep that picture open so then you can keep referring back to it. So I'm using the on-screen rulers. And one tip here is if you line it up to either side or to the bottom of the numbers and the grey lines, then hopefully everything will line up. Just using my arrow keys, by the way, you saw those popping up to make sure that it's properly aligned. And I often deselect it to make sure that that's right on the edge of that line, and I'm at maximum zoom as well, so that I can definitely make sure that I'm in the right place. Doing the same again here for the other rectangle. Again, using my keys to nudge rather than using the mouse, so I've got precise control and I won't affect any other orientations. Using the view tools there and the selection box to align everything correctly. Next up, I'm going to weld those two shapes together. Although this shocking pink is quite intense, I do need to mute that down a bit because I need to see what's going to go on top in a minute. Okay, so that's the basic outline of the template, as you can see there. So it pretty much matches up. There's a little bit more to do, including the score lines, so we'll do those next. To create these, I use a rectangle first, which I enter the line editing mode by double clicking, open the shape, and then delete nodes until I have one line left. Then I'll select it and move it. And I'll often make sure that it's just a bit shorter or just a bit narrower than the shape that I'm placing it on, because I don't want those dash lines going right to the edge of the cardstock that I'm cutting out. Now just before I start duplicating this, I'm going to make sure that it is a dashed line because I want it to be a score line, not a straight cut. And then what I'm going to do is just keep pressing the D key after I've moved each of the previous versions along. So every time I've got one in place, I'll press D and then move that to the next place. I'm not going to be super accurate right now because I am going to go back in and adjust these in just a minute. So again, on maximum zoom, I'm using the lines on the measuring grid to help me make sure that they're in the right position. The reason that I'm using the top line rather than the shape is because I've got all the numbers there ready for me to use. And also I can use my alignment tools after I've finished. And rather than zoom out and zoom in again, I'm just using the scroll bars to move around. Very handy indeed. Okay, so I've got all the lines roughly where I need them. And now what I'm going to do is select everything and then align horizontally. So I know all of those score lines are now directly in the center of that. I press G on my keyboard to group everything, and then I know it's all going to stay in place. When this happens, it does often knock it off kilter a bit because it kind of brings everything into the center of the selection. So you might need to readjust by moving it down a little bit. Next up, I'm creating another score line, this time for the horizontal lines. That's the word I was looking for. Same process as before. This time obviously I'm using the ruler down the left hand side of the virtual mat to help me position where my score lines are going to be. And again, once I've got everything roughly in place, just going back into maximum zoom and using that ruler and my mouse or the arrow keys to position these more precisely. Selecting everything again, and then by holding shift and click on the large shape, I can deselect that and just have my score line selected, and then I'm only using my right hand arrow key to move these across the screen to where I want them to be, because if I try and use my alignment tools they just won't work because that is not in the position of the center. So just zooming in really just to roughly check that they're in the right place. And they look all right to me. Okay, so selecting everything again and grouping it. I can get rid of that rectangle now because I'm done, and just a quick save just to make sure that I've saved my progress so far, because I don't want the computer to crash or the internet to pack up and lose everything. Okay, so this time I'm now working with the triangle. and I'm going to change the line color in a moment, but first up I'm just changing the dimensions to be the width of the flaps, basically. So in this case 20 by 20 millimeters. Using the rotation key, using the rotation tool to make sure that it's at the right orientation. I basically want to cut a wedge off the corner. So I just duplicate to make sure that I've got a copy of the original shape. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more and then change the fill color to white and the line color get rid of, because as I mentioned before, that can sometimes get in the way of the designing. Again, you can use your mouse or your arrow keys to move that into place, and once it is, you'll select that with the main shape and then use the subtract tool. Now your big shape will now be sitting on top of your score line, so they'll almost look like they've disappeared, but don't panic, we'll sort that out in a minute. Just working with the next triangle. Now at the moment it looks like it's sat behind the main shape. So if we right click on the main shape and center back, there is now our triangle. And again, by holding shift and click, that helps us keep those rotations at 45 degrees each time with the triangle. So I'm just going to carry on. There we go. There's the next one. And again, right click, center back on the main shape. I'm afraid you'll have to do this each time because it does happen each time. And then I'll just have a quick look. Yep, looking good so far. Now what I'll need to do is just double check the original thing to see what other corners I need to crop. So, okay, so I need the right hand ones and the bottom ones. There we go, right hand, bottom. I think I'll leave you with a bit of music while I do this next bit. Very similar to what we did before, just making sure that everything's in place and then working our way around. This time though, because I know what I'm doing for each corner, I am actually duplicating and getting all of the corners in position before I start going in close on zoom. That way I don't have to keep zooming out to find out where I'm at or where I'm going next. Okay, so I think we're almost there. So I can get rid of that triangle and select everything there. Just double checking back with the original template to make sure I haven't missed anything. I think I'm okay. Just save it again to make sure that I've saved everything I've done so far. And then the next thing would be getting it onto the machine. Now, here's an interesting thing. Here's an error code. It can't export it because something's crossed over the red lines, and that's the cutting area. So all I need to do is select everything, move it further onto the mat, and then everything will be fine. Just save again so that it's not going to cause a problem in the future. Download, and then we've got the usual options, either download to your PC so you can transfer it via cable or USB, or you can obviously transfer it via Wi-Fi if your model is compatible. So Tracy, I hope that helps you, and I hope that helps anybody else that's looking to do this. So if you scribble down a load of ideas about templates and all that sort of thing, it's a great way of converting those into cutting files. And of course, because I've saved it, it's also here in my projects for me to use again and again in the future. Right, that just about sums it up. Thank you very much for watching. For more hints, tips and tutorials, please subscribe to my YouTube channel or visit me on any of these social networking sites.